This is an introduction to a series of videos that I'm planning on creating with the intention to state out my viewpoints, be they ideological, political, philosophical, spiritual, just cover all the bases. And I'm doing so with several objectives. The first objective is to be logging my evolving viewpoints. I'm fortunate enough to have had a viewpoint that has constantly been shifting throughout my entire life. I have a very different view than what I did when I was a child, when I was an older child, when I was pubescent, when I was post-pubescent, when I was a young adult, and now when I'm in my late 20s. I hope to continue shifting my view. I mean, I assume that I, at least to a certain degree, shift my view from this point on. But hopefully it will be notable, and hopefully these videos will help me note what those changes are. So a little bit of a time capsule where I can learn about myself and hopefully have a sense of humor about how off base I was when I was young. Another reason that I'm making these videos is so that I can cite myself, so that I can, you know, when people ask me my different viewpoints on this or that, be they, you know, gun control or, you know, Freudianism, what have you, that I can simply just direct to the correct video without having to, you know, state my opinion out for like the 100th time on the same subject. Because there are certain subjects that I have stated my opinion or my understanding on far too many times. So this is something that possibly should have been done sooner. Another reason why I'm doing this is to hopefully have my opinions contested. So if I have my views or my opinions stated out a little bit more clearly, then hopefully there can be more people who can understand them or ask me better questions and challenge my views to where ultimately in the long run I develop better views. So two of these objectives being a little bit collaborated, that I'm hoping to develop a better viewpoint and also hoping to log said improvement. So hopefully that'll transpire. I hope to cover most everything while also trying not to be a little bit repetitive. I'm hoping to not just regurgitate the same opinions that I happen to have acquired from other popular internet folk, and try to keep it to more original views, while also just kind of generally noting the views that I have that are possibly a little bit less original, but still views that I hold. I hope that everyone feels comfortable in addressing these different subjects with me. I hope that people feel comfortable challenging my views in a non-aggressive tone, in a very polite tone. I hope to be a spark for civil discourse, and that hopefully there will be better dialogue, you know, with me and my peers based off of these videos. And I figured that I should quite possibly start off with framing where I got to, how I view things now, how I got to my views. I was raised in a non-denominational Christian household. I was raised with a single mother. I was raised with mostly Republicans. I was raised in California in the Silicon Valley. So I've actually been really quite fortunate in that I've had both partisan dichotomy exposure, where I lived in a very liberal area and was raised by very conservative people, which made me quite moderate most of my life. And I don't really like the term moderate now because it's really loosey-goosey. But generally speaking, as far as if you're going to frame things between the two different political ends of right and left, I really am moderate. as I've mentioned, I was raised in a non-denominational household, non-denominational Christian, and I am an atheist now. I wholly, I can't even put enough emphasis on this. I wholly believed in the Bible, Jesus Christ, etc., until I was about 19, and that's when I pulled myself out of that. I used rationality, even though I had never been exposed to rationality as a philosophy beforehand. So I was very pleased to know that there was a community and an actual method set up as far as what rationality was, because that was the methodology in which I used to pull myself out of that ideology, because I wanted to, upon leaving my household, upon becoming an independent and an individual, I genuinely wanted to challenge everything that I thought I knew. I wanted to make sure I weeded out everything that was false, everything that was brainwashed upon me. And I think the spark of this was my research out of curiosity. It was kind of like one of those internet search tangents where you start searching one thing and then all of a sudden it goes on to like being 12 different things. But it ended up going on to what are the methods of brainwashing. And the methods of brainwashing actually parallel parenting. They're almost exactly the same. So even though parenting and parents are really important, it's also apparent as an adult, once you leave adolescence, to understand that they are one and the same almost, and that you need to challenge everything that your parents taught you. If your parents didn't tell you to already do that, which they should have. Your parents should have told you to question them, to be better than them. And some of them might have done it to a marginal extent, and some of them might have not done it at all. But if you're going to become an independent thinker, it is imperative that you have absolutely zero faith in everything and anything that your parents have taught you, anything and everything that your teachers have taught you, and basically get to a point where there needs to be a point where, as an individual, you go to ground zero, where you decide that everything that you've been taught was taught to you with a bias, with an objective, and with misinformation, to where you go through and you challenge. And I was in a fortunate situation where I could do that, where I could take the time to go through and do a lot of research and uproot and challenge everything that I had been previously taught. And I was also very fortunate to have a social circle to where there were people with very, very differing ideologies, where I could have the views that I had previously held challenged and contested, and it really gave me a lot of perspective. And now I identify as an atheist and even an anti-theist. My political views are a little bit more complicated than that, so I can't really scope it down to a single terminology other than not this, because that's really what atheism is. It's like, it's not theism. Don't have a religion. So it's a little bit intrinsically bastardized in terminology, and so there's no intrinsically bastardized terminology for being politically bastardized, which is what I feel like I am. I feel politically bastardized because there were a lot of right-wing values that I held that I don't feel that the Republicans are holding, and that there are a lot of left-wing values that I don't think that Democrats are holding. So I'm kind of in this limbo where it's like, you guys both decided to throw away your best qualities and just double down on everything I hate about both of your parties. And so that's where I fall politically within the whole partisan dichotomy, binary stuff. As far as values that I generally hold, I value individualistic liberties, and I value the human race, and I value my country, um, which means that I'm not a fan of subcultures. I'm not a fan of isolating yourself to your race, isolating yourself to your religion, isolating yourself to your sexual identity, etc., etc. I don't think that those are productive for you as an individual, and I don't think those are productive for the nation. I don't think that's productive for humanity. So I am, generally speaking, opposed to subcultures. They naturally and organically exist, but I don't think that it's healthy for a person to tie that into one's own identity, and I don't think that it has any place in politics. And I will definitely elaborate as far as where I stand on my contention regarding identity politics. Economically speaking, I've become a little bit confused as far as where the best direction is to go from here, because it seems that there are a lot of things that we need to go, one step forward, two steps back, one step forward, two steps back, because there are still a lot of residual things that are hanging on from the Great Depression and a lot of other different time periods. There are a lot of economic policies that exist in our government today that existed for economic states that we are presently not in. And that's really unfortunate. So I think that it's good for me to state off right off the bat that I think that economic policies should by default have an expiration date, because whether it's welfare or taxes or just across the board, because economics are constantly evolving, and they have an expiration date. Economic policies have an expiration date, so for us to not take them off the shelf or to not give economics a shelf life is a huge grievance. Another thing that I think it would be good for me to touch base on is that though I don't think that traditionalist is necessarily the correct term for me, is that I think that the value of true femininity and the value of true masculinity have been just greatly diminished socially, especially considering how much they have driven society, how much they have driven the human race. So I think it's really a grievance how much certain natural default traits have been demonized. I have been involved in these movement spheres ever since, I would say, Gamergate would be accurate, maybe a little bit before Gamergate, because I think I started following people who were covering Gamergate on a deeper level right before it all transpired. So, for instance, I was keeping my eye on Milo Yiannopoulos since before he was a blonde, just to give you guys a reference point. So, I guess this may be a telltale, but I'm a gamer. I'm I guess you'd say a pop nerd, in that I like sci-fi and fantasy in literature, which, makes you a nerd as far as pop culture goes. I also like staying up to date on science. I like following through with understanding where longevity goes, and I think that we as a people should prioritize defeating mortality. I think that we should be prioritizing moving towards the singularity. I don't know that I would necessarily call myself a transhumanist per se, and as far as if I were to register on the voter ballot as a certain political ideology, because I haven't really seen a lot of transhumanist candidates, so I don't feel comfortable backing them blindly. I feel much more comfortable being nonpartisan But as far as what the objective and the directive is behind transhumanism versus other political views, then it's just a long shot yes. But of course, I deviate, or I just agree with, I'm not uncomfortable with disagreeing with any viewpoint, even if it's something that I've tacked onto myself the moment they deviate from adhering to facts, reason, and rationality. Once they denounce science, once they want to impede on progress for emotional reasons, that's when I tend to disagree and deviate from any other ideological sphere, because I have moments of agreeing with everyone. More often than not, I'll agree with people more than I disagree with people, because I think that, generally speaking, people have the same values, especially people of the same culture. So it's fair to say that most all people, especially most all people within the same culture, hold basically all the same views. And I think it's important to not let ourselves become distracted from this, and to remember that we all generally agree with each other, that as far as problems are problems, but we might disagree with each other as far as diagnosing what the disease is, and therefore we may disagree with each other on what the cure is. So even in moments when we wholly disagree with someone, I think it's important to remember that it's most likely that we actually pretty much agree with them, but we're just having a lapse as far as information and facts. And so the best thing to do is to not challenge their opinion, not challenge their values, but challenge their facts, because either they're lacking something or you are, or both. So that's really the best way to go about these things. So hopefully this was a pretty clean, laid out outline as far as where I'm planning on going, where my views are, what my hitting points are. Maybe I'll have live streaming discussions with different people as far as different ideas and views, or even debates and what have you. I don't know where I'll go with this, but hopefully this is the first of many, and I appreciate you for taking the time to listen to this very boring video, because the first is always the worst. The pilot is always slow as. Thank you for watching.